Hello everyone. We will be talking about understanding user needs and research planning in terms of sampling strategies in user research. So, in this particular lecture, we will explain why sampling is critical to the validity and generalizability of user research findings that you are making. We will distinguish between different kinds of sampling methodologies: probability sampling, which is either random or stratified, and non-probability based sampling, which can be purposive, convenience, snowball methods. We will also calculate appropriate sample size based on the research methodology, and how can we say that we have reached saturation, what is the power analysis for quantitative analysis. We will also identify and mitigate common sampling biases, including self-selection, availability, homogeneity, and survivor bias. So, let's look at sampling fundamentals first. So, population implies the entire group about which you want to draw conclusions. So, let's say you are interested in a particular research question which deals with Indians. Now, if I look at West Bengal over here and Gujarat over here, there is a lot of difference even between these two particular states. Simple things like the sun might be rising in some place in West Bengal at 5:30 in the morning, and the same might happen in some place in similarly in Gujarat at 7:30 a.m. So, not only the language, not only the food habits, but also when you get sunrise, when you get sunset, and as a result your entire day's scheduling also varies. Now, let's look at Jammu and Kashmir. It has a very different kind of terrain as compared to what I will have in my southern part of the country or any other part of the country. When I look at this particular part of the country, it again is very close to the tallest mountain ranges available in the world, the Himalayas. So, now geographic conditions leading to different kind of food habits, plus different languages, plus even when the sunrise and the sunset happens, because everybody in India follows the same time zone, they all create a lot of differences. So, when I am talking about the Indian population over whom I want to generalize my study, it is about the entire group about which we want to draw these conclusions. Now, in order to do that, I have to take a subset of that particular population, and I have to ensure that subset represents well the people of India. So, I might have to pick some people from Arunachal Pradesh, some people from Odisha, and some people from other states, and I have to also ensure that there is good representation of gender. In case it is my research also needs certain kind of socio-economic context, then I have to also ensure that there is enough representation from each of the socio-economic strata. So, sample is a subset selected to represent the population, and when you are selecting the sample, you have to ensure that the sample selection is representative enough of the entire population, which is the Indian population in this particular example. Now, representativeness implies how accurate the sample reflects the population, and it is the most important thing that determines whether the findings that you have are valid or not valid. You might see many of the researches which happen in universities, they are usually conducted by recruiting participants within the university system. These participants also might be very young participants. They might not represent the entire population of the country. In case you are trying to look at something, let's say what is the reading behavior of people in the country. In that particular context, the 18 to 24-year-olds are not representative enough. Similarly, these are also university students, so most likely they are reading way more than a lot of Indian population. So, again there is no representativeness for that particular context. So, you have to always consider whether what is your research question and what representativeness means in that particular context. Now comes sampling error. So, the gap between sample statistics and the true population parameters. So, not always it is possible for us to gather a sample. So, I want to make a prediction regarding whether a particular app that I am developing for people who want to track their exercising using this particular app, and they would like to also track their other fitness parameters. And I am able to recruit only people who are in the age range of 18 to 30 in my university. So I know that there is a sampling error, and I cannot avoid that because it is very difficult given the resources that I have to reach out to a representative enough sample. So in that case, you should always declare that my sampling has this particular parameters, and I acknowledge that this is the limitation of my sample. Now, why it matters? If your sample is invalid, if it is not representative enough, you might lead to invalid conclusions. So, let's say I am conducting a user research to understand how old people who are older than 60 years are interacting with their mobile phones. And if I end up selecting a sample size which is only university professors who are that too university professors in a technical university, they are supposed to be more tech savvy. So when I make conclusions on the basis of their interactions with smartphones, that will not be representative of what a general population in India will represent in that same age group. So biases get introduced. A systematic error that skews findings in one particular direction. So if this entire population of more than 60 years old professors from technical universities are tech savvy with their mobile phones, I might end up saying that, oh, using smartphones is not very difficult and people can do it with minimal guidance, whereas the same with non-tech population in the same age range will not be the same. So when we are trying to do this sampling, I will try to do sampling either by using probability based methods or by using non-probability based methods. So choosing the right sampling strategy is extremely important. Let's look at these in detail. So if I am trying to look at a probability based sampling, I can have something called as random, stratified, systematic sampling. So every member has the equal probability or a known chance for selection when I am using probability based sampling. This helps in minimizing the biases. So for example, I want to understand what is the health level of the entire country. So national health surveys. I want to understand exit poll results. So you might have seen several times exit poll results are not very correct. So the problem might not be with whether people came out and cast the vote to the same person that they have cast inside. The problem might not be that. The problem might be most likely your sampling error, because you selected the wrong kind of people who were not representative enough of that particular constituency. So if I want to do this national health survey, it will be a good idea that when I am trying to draw this sample, I use the voter roll as sampling frame. Now even when I am using this voter roll as the sampling frame, I am able to only capture people in the country who are 18 and above. I am not able to capture people who are less than 18. So in case I also need to capture those people, I should actually go ahead with the survey data of the country. Now the problem with the survey data of the country is it is not very possible to gather the information in real time. So let's say if I want to take that data today, the current survey data is more than a decade old. However, the voter lists are more updated, so it might be a good starting point, and when I reach out to those families who have members more than 18 years old, I might be able to capture the younger members of the family as well. Now let's say I want to do a clinical drug trial with randomized patient allocation. So in this particular context, what I will do is I will recruit people who will have the different kinds of health parameters as per my clinical trials requirement. Then I will be randomly distributing people into two different groups. The one which will be the trial group, the other which will be the control group. I can also do stratified poll sampling by age, gender and region. So let's say how these exit polls are conducted. They do a stratified sampling in terms of age, gender and region. So they will go to different, so within a particular constituency, there will be lots of voting polls. They will select some of these voting polls which are going to present different kinds of viewpoints. Similarly, different age groups will be selected. Similarly, both genders will be given equal representation, and that's how when the exit poll is done, the chances that its results are closer to the actual poll result is higher. However, since any exit poll data is always about a sample and not the full population, whereas the actual election results are about the full population, there always will be variations. Now comes to purposive sampling. In purposive sampling, researchers selects cases based on relevance to the research question. It is quite common when I am trying to do qualitative research. So let's say I want to understand the burnout of ICU nurses. So I want to interview ICU nurses to do that particular activity. So what I am trying, because my research question wants to understand that, my sampling is purposive. I go and identify only ICU nurses. Because it is qualitative research, I cannot interview a very large population. So I will have a target that I want to interview 10 people or 20 people, or I want to keep interviewing till I reach saturation. What is saturation? Saturation means when in any qualitative research I am not getting any new information by going to the next informant. Now there is a likelihood that you are selecting only similar kind of informants. As a result, you are not getting new results. However, if your selection of your participants has been well organized, then I reach saturation after a point of time wherein addition of any new participant is not going to give me any new information. Now let's say I want to understand that how the education happens in the underserved districts of the state or country. So then I will be selecting some schools in these underserved districts for this educational study. This is again a purposive sampling. Now when I am trying to do this purposive sampling, I might have resource constraints, time constraints. I might also have this constraint that I have to go and do these in-depth interviews, and I need an introducer to this community who will then trust me and give me information. So all of these leads me to take this purposive sampling strategy. Then comes another example, which is about, let's say I want to understand climate scientists about their consensus on certain climate related activities. So here in this case, I have to gather a expert panel of climate scientists and conduct a Delphi study. In Delphi study, what happens is I will give a particular set of questions, or I will give a set of data, and I will give it first to individual scientists or individual participants, and they will have to first put down their opinion. Once they have put down their opinion, then they are supposed to share the opinion with each other, and through discussion come to a consensus and deliver a final piece of work, which is the work of that particular expert panel. Again, it is purposive in nature, depends on the experts who are available, depends on the on my reach to the experts for this particular context. Then comes convenience and snowball sampling. So convenience sampling is about whoever is readily available and I make them as a participant, and snowball participation is when existing participants refer me to the new ones. So both of these sampling methods are fast. However, there is a very high bias risk. So let's say I want to do surveying of psychology students from one lecture hall. So why I did this? Because I want to, let's say I have a question which is about how your mental well-being is affected on the basis of your social media exposure. Now for me it is very easy that I go to a particular classroom, and let's say this classroom is my classroom only, and I tell all the students, please fill up this questionnaire, because these students belong to my classroom and I gave them this questionnaire in the classroom as an activity to perform. They might not be willing to participate, but they are participating just because they are in the class. Even if you give them this right to not participate, they might still participate just because of the fact that the teacher is standing in front of them. I want to recruit rare disease patients via support group referrals. Here in this case, I am doing snowball methodology because these are rare diseases and it is not possible to find too many people with them, and I have to go through some support referral groups to identify the next person who might be suffering from this same rare disease. Then comes pilot usability tests with colleagues before full launch, and this is a very usual practice anywhere and everywhere. Any particular user research needs to be piloted, and most of these piloted are done with colleagues. However, if it is possible to do your pilots with the right kind of participants, then it is very good, because then it is a true pilot test. However, given resource constraint, this is something which people usually go ahead with. So, when you are trying to these sampling methods, how do you select them? So, let's compare the sampling methods. When I am going for random sampling, there is an equal probability of every particular member of that particular population to get selected. This minimizes bias. It requires you to have the data of the complete population list. Only then you can select randomly people. It is best for surveys where you require large samples. Now you want to do stratified sampling. So the population is divided into subgroups with random selection within each. It ensures key segments are represented. It is again higher cost, but it has better coverage as compared to the first random sampling, the quota sampling. In this case, you fill quotas for demographic groups. Here what you are trying to do is, you have already set up that I want to do this user research where 50% of the population will be male and 50% will be female. You can also select any other kind of percentage. You have to have a justified reason for that. I want to have 20% of the population as people from West Bengal, 30% from Uttar Pradesh, and so on. Again, there has to be a justification why you are assigning these different quotas to these different demographic groups. And then I am going to do quota sampling. So, structured convenience sampling, it is faster than the stratified sampling and more systematic than the pure convenience sampling also. Purposive sampling. So, selection is based on relevance to the research question. It is essential for qualitative research. Transparency about criteria is very critical over here. So, I want to understand the stories of people who have been victims of health fraud. So, in that particular context, I am doing purposive sampling and I am selecting these people and trying to understand what kind of health fraud has happened with them. Then, snowball sampling. Existing participants refer new ones, useful for hard to reach populations. Risk is the referred participants are typically homogeneous because they know each other, they are friends with each other, but however my context is something that finding the next participant is very difficult. So, like the example of somebody having a rare disease. So, how do we determine the sample size? Sample size is supposed to be determined also on the basis of the statistical method that we select. We will discuss more about that when we go into our lectures on statistical methods. However, there are other methods that we use for sample size determination that we will discuss now. So, if you are trying to do qualitative research and you are planning to have some kind of an interview, a ballpark number is between 5 to 15. If you are trying to do focus group interview, in a particular interview, you can have between 8 to 12 people. So, here our aim is to, so in a group you have 8 to 10 people and try to conduct 8 to 12 focus group sessions in order to aim for saturation when new data no longer reveals new themes. If you are trying to do usability testing, so 5 to 8 users usually reveal 85% of the usability issues, which helps you in rapid iteration of your product. Surveys which are supposed to be analyzed using quantitative methods. So, the formulation over here is n equal to z square multiplied by p within brackets 1 minus p divided by e square. So, the z component over here is about the confidence level that you are looking at. So, usually most of the research that happens in the context of design, they are targeting a confidence level of 95%, that is the minimum. Then P is the expected proportion, E is the margin of error. So by using this formula, the n will give me the number of participants that I need to recruit. Now this is again a ballpark value. We will also check when we go into statistical methods. There are more methods to calculate the right number of people that you require for a quantitative analysis. Now if I have a qualitative philosophy, where I try to aim for depth over breadth. So I am trying to have rich data from few people. So I want to interview very few number of people, and I want to do in-depth interviews. So maybe I want to study them for 2 years in depth by using ethnographic research. So in all these contexts, I am giving priority to quality and saturation rather than the number of people that I can reach. Now, some of the common sampling biases that you have to be careful about is self-selection bias is the first one. So, people who volunteer differ systematically from people who do not volunteer for your study. So, you have to mitigate with incentives and targeted recruitment. So, let's say I put my research onto a particular platform which are meant for helping you gather your participants, and this particular research platform works in this fashion that I will fill up your research question and you fill up my research question. So, these are volunteers who are, in order to get certain points, filling up your questionnaires, and there is a self-selection bias over here. However, if you reach out to just people in the public who do not have the same kind of interest, they are participating in that research just because they are interested in that research, there is lesser bias. However, still there is a bias. So, let's say I have a questionnaire which is around, does playing entertainment games help you in learning about sustainability? So, people who are more interested in the concept of sustainability, they might end up responding to my questionnaire rather than people who think playing games is not about sustainability. They might not even try to answer my questionnaire. So, that is the problem with self-selection bias. Not that we can always avoid it. If we can avoid it, well and good. If you cannot, then always report it as a limitation of your study. Then comes the availability bias. Here, selecting convenient participants who have time. Mitigate with flexible scheduling remote options. So, there might be some participants who might be very good to have in your sample, in your data sample. However, they are not available because of their scheduling. So, in order to get rid of this bias, you can try to see if you can have some flexible scheduling. Is it okay to do some remote surveys or remote interviews with these kind of people? Homogeneity bias. So, snowball sampling recruits similar kind of people because I will refer you to a person who is my friend, and there is a high likelihood that there are similarities. So, here you can mitigate this by assigning some quota. So, if somebody refers to someone, I can go through that particular process only for certain quota. Beyond that, I should find another person who is not related to this snowball process. Also try to, as far as possible, recruit through multiple channels in order to avoid that. Then comes the survivor bias. So, studying only continuing users misses why others left. So, let's say I am trying to understand what people love about my fitness app, and I do not study the people who left the app. Then in that case, I am only studying people who might be a fitness enthusiast, and that's why they are following it, and it was not something so special about my app. So, study also the people who left your app. So, track churn, people who are leaving, conduct exit interviews with the lapsed users. Desirability bias. Participants give socially acceptable answers also many a times and not the honest ones. So, let's say in my sustainability questionnaire, if I ask them a question, do you use a disposable plastic? And because of it is no longer socially acceptable to say yes to it, people might not say strongly agree. They might say somewhere like agree, or they might say neutral, or they might also try to be totally dishonest and say totally disagree. So, minimize through neutral language third party administration so that this desirability bias comes up as less as possible. So, the lecture gives you this one idea. If your sample is not representative, your findings will not be valid. Even perfect analysis of a flawed data yields flawed conclusions. So the key takeaways are: sampling is the basic. For any particular research, a representative sample is the cornerstone of valid research. Poor sampling leads to flawed conclusions regardless of the analysis quality. When you are trying to select the method for sampling, choose probability sampling for generalizability. When you are trying to do quantitative data collection and quantitative data analysis, use purposive or snowball sampling for deep qualitative insights. The right size of your sample, use power analysis for quantitative studies and saturation as the criteria whenever you are going ahead with qualitative research to determine this appropriate sample size. Try to mitigate the sample biases, so actively identify and address self-selection, availability, homogeneity and survivor bias to protect your research's validity. In case you know that you have not been able to meet any of these criteria, always in the limitation section of your report mention that these are the limitations and the whole findings needs to be looked at considering these limitations. So that brings us to the end of this lecture. These are the references, and see you next when we will be discussing about how to do our research design by choosing the methods.